Hello everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation on BRICS and why the West is big mad. So, for the last 40 years, they did win the Cold War through interventions, corruption, media corruption, sending bad influence, and you know, basically getting people to trade in their socialism and welfare and happiness for Coca-Cola, prostitution, pornography, etc. However, one second. However, after the collapse of socialism's first global attempt, they now had no checks and no balances and used it to exponentially increase their brutalization. For example, then you had neoliberalism, then you had a general, no longer did the West need to compete, and capitalism in general did not need, for example, welfare to balance against socialism, no. And so there was a mass privatization campaign, and since then there's been so many bombings, genocides, etc. Interventions in the Middle East, all of them ran by the Zionists who tell us to hate Islam. And then, this was actually good luck for Europe, because otherwise Europe would have been outcompeted by the Soviet Union, and so would America. China, if you see how rich China is today, they would have gotten that rich regardless. However, you would have the Soviet Union as the world's biggest economy, China as the second biggest, then the other BRICS countries, then America, then Europe, all right? No one would trade with Europe, no one would hang out with Europe, more or less. But in this current order, we have a three-parted system between exploiting countries, exploited countries, and unwilling countries, okay? So unwilling, think North Korea, think Russia, think Iran, think China, think all of those who do not fall in line in the Zionist world order. Usually they get executed, maybe through assassins, or maybe they get put in the Hague because, again, their values don't align with the Zionist values. However, despite liberalism winning, we still see its inferiority today as a major world problem. You have all the money, there's so much money, but all of it goes towards Labubu, toys, Lego, pornography, Coca-Cola, etc., etc. Even in feudalism, now living in capitalism, we look at the beauty of feudal architecture or imperial architecture and we think, wow, why don't we have pretty houses anymore? Because it's not how the system is built, and it can't be changed either. If you try to implement any kind of social ownership within capitalism, it gets basically bounced upon. All capitalist entities basically try to exterminate it because they have a very parasitic nature. It's almost like ants to sugar. Private enterprise always tries to destroy everything good, but you would have to exterminate all rich people before you could create any kind of real social ownership. You had bank collapse, market collapse. Immigration was used to sustain falling economies, but with COVID-19, that was no longer possible. And then we have this mirage shift, which led to the new global outbreak of fascism and a debt crisis for America and the West. And this is where BRICS comes in, and in general the re-emergence of Eastern countries, the second wave of socialism. Just to prove a little bit about the COVID thing, socialist countries had close to zero outbreak of COVID at all, and despite the Jewish genocide against Palestine and the Zionist Volodymyr Zelensky's war against Russia, we still have a global failure. And the West calls this that, oh, there's less, they call it that the democratic decline, but really it's a democratic increase. It's nothing to be worried about. But yeah, people say that fascism is when imperialism comes home to roost. The systems which the West had created to intervene within Africa and the Middle East can also be used to attack the West itself, and that's what's happening now. And to shield itself from that, most other countries are now uniting, and this is called BRICS, okay? And this stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But yeah, so in outside of Western countries, we see success with socialism. Within EU countries, we see failure. And people are generally seeing the success of BRICS and the failure of Western countries, UAE, Israel, Rwanda, Ukraine, countries which are, breaking international law, going into war. And this is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's now clear that either you're a socialist or you're a demon. You're basically a Satanist. You're no better than Hitler himself. So now we have, a kind of critical breaking point where you have almost no democracies left in the West. Everyone is either a EU colony, a USA colony, or a non-Western colony, non-Western independent free country. And while the West is going through a basically identity crisis, returning to fascism, going under neo-feudal dictatorial struggles, Russia, China is trying to push human rights and make the world a better place. The West is currently rearming, as they say, because they're fighting for democracy, but this really means just buying more weapons from Zionist manufacturers. And yeah, it just shows that no matter what, the West will always respond to whatever problem they have with violence. But if we do follow in the BRICS line, there is hope. However, we also can't it's not just niceness. It's about picking a side, and it's about punishing those who crossed against it. For example, Keir Starmer, who is a Jewish Zionist who pretended to be Christian so that he could win for the Labour Party, only to push far-right extremist policies. For example, he supports genocide against Palestine. He sent spy planes to aid in the genocide. That is unforgivable. Any kind of support for the EU, any kind of support for Israel, these things are unforgivable. So it must be said that if we are to fix our societies, we yes must join BRICS and join the East. However, we must also punish with the strictest punishment possible, even more strict than lifetime in prison, anyone who goes against the socialist line. Yeah. Same with Ursula von der Leyen, same thing with Mark Rutte, etc., etc. There can be no tolerance for Western fascism. If you say, oh, I support the EU, then you're just as bad as Hitler, who supported also European unity under white skin and the Aryan race. It's the same thing. But yeah. So the primary hindrance for the Western peace and justice movement is one, lack of mass movement, which is very difficult to achieve under capitalist dictatorship, and two, European cultural and political influence. So the Zionists basically run a lot of the American and European media and use it to spread evil culture, and basically tell people that the only way to live is to drink and not live a very good life, but just live in line with modern capitalist values. Basically, people cannot really imagine anything else. How would life look like if it weren't, postmodern and millennial, I guess. But to explain mass movement, it's basically the Leninist style of parties which own a bit of the economy and the media, so that it becomes basically a block within politics and a block within the economy as well. This is the starting system of the socialism within one country model, which basically does this once again, just by turning an entire country into a mass movement. But we also have to be a bit realistic, that if you are a country in the middle of Europe, it's going to take a long time to declare independence and achieve freedom from capitalism, since the influence from these countries is so pushy all the time. And then we also have to be mindful that with no such bastion already existing and no such mass movement currently recruiting within the West or near the West, the socialist line must be very strict. It must be based around unitary democracy, democratic centralism, and it must be it cannot accept any kind of new socialism, Eurocommunism, reactionary progressivism, or reactionary anti-conservatism. There can't be too much freedom actually if you are to take this serious. But the reason it's so important is that once you have achieved a kind of sufficient amount of power and influence, and are able to flip a country, as to say, you could then join BRICS. And that's kind of the new hope. It's kind of like rejoining the international. BRICS is a hub, a kind of lighthouse for those seeking refuge from imperialism. You can see that with Palestine, who was admitted. And if you are admitted, you have now trading partners. You now have a new world order where all people of all races are equal and can trade on the same patent. And it also serves as a shield against sanctions or interventions from the West, who previously had been given free rein since the 90s to attack anyone they please for any reason, using any means, including genocide, as we see how the Jews genocide the Palestinians. And the reason I don't say Israeli is because there's no such thing as Israeli. Anyway, and then you might ask, well, what would be the finalized world decolonization? How will it look like if we solve the problem in its entirety? Can that ever succeed? Is that ever possible? Well, yes, absolutely, but it might take more than BRICS. But BRICS is currently the biggest threat, a kind of global bloc, and currently BRICS doesn't do all that much. It still does some things. For example, it has replaced the IMF with the New Development Bank, and it has a infrastructure branch called Belt and Road Initiative, and a group called the Shanghai Cooperation Council. And Intervision is now winning over Eurovision. But a finalized worldview will probably look very different. It will probably look like EU being dissolved, corporations not having international overbearing power, a rise in regional, national, continental democratic businesses, and then it will no longer be might is right. It will be nice is might. It will be goodness is might, and this might actually make the world a civilized place like the world we were promised. And no longer will the West intervene in the East. Instead, the East might intervene in the West, decolonizing, de-Christianizing, freeing Catalonia, freeing Samiland, breaking apart Germany. We need a new East Germany. We need an independent Bavaria. All unlegitimate Western countries need to be abolished. And Israel